Stitch Cuties, it's Brittany. In this video tutorial, we are going to talk about some applique tips for when you are assembling your quilt top and then putting on that top applique border. So when you open your box, you'll have, of course, all these beautiful sashing fabrics. You have your background fabric, your binding fabric, and your top bow applique pieces. So in your pattern, I just want to point out a few things before we talk about the applique. Read through everything. We have video tutorials that are standard for any project that help you with when you're assembling your quilt with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. We have tutorials for helping you talk about nesting your seams and getting the perfect points. So especially helpful when you're joining all these seams together. And then of course, we have detailed cutting instructions for you. And then when you go to assemble your inner quilt top, you're gonna put everything together from these sashings inwards. And then you're going to sew your left and right border on, then your bottom border, and then your top border. What I specifically want to point out is that your left, right, and bottom border are narrower than your top border. So your top border is a little bit wider to accommodate the bow, okay? So when we get back to the applique instructions, the first thing you're going to do, as I just said, you'll cut your fabric. You can see the left, right, and bottom borders are going to be 5 1/4 strips. When we get down to step 6, that's where I'm going to start talking right now about how we're going to do the applique. You're going to use 8 inch by width of fabric strips there. You're going to sew 2 strips together. That's going to give you way more length than you need, but 1 strip of fabric isn't enough, right? Your border is going to be approximately 50 inches long. You're going to want to measure the top and bottom of your quilt and take that average. So if all of your seam allowance is perfect, that's what your number is going to be, is 50. However, in the real world, no matter how great our seam allowance is, the border may be a little different. That's why we ask you to measure your width of your quilt and you're going to cut your border to size, but that's going to be done after the applique, okay? So what I'm going to be talking about now are step 6 all the way through 11, okay? So what we're going to do with the applique, first up, we are going to get our placement guide taped together. So we have the main part of the bow, and we're going to line that up. Now, the border, remember, we're working with an 8 inch by width of fabric, 2 pieces sewn together. So we're going to have a really nice long piece that we're working with. And then we're going to trim it down after we've sewn so that the border is the perfect length, right? And then we have the right side of this bow. Get that on there, perfect. So we're going to open our applique bag. Now I know you're on your last block, so you are an applique pro by now, but well, why not? One last time, we'll go through numbering our applique pieces. You have this big bag in your box. And so we're just going to take these out and we are going to number our pieces. Easy peasy. They'll be a perfect fit, so you'll know you have them in the right spot. And then we'll just figure out which bow is which. So now I'm going to take my fine point Sharpie and I'm going to number my pieces. So this is number 1. This is number 2. Then we have number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and then last but not least, number 7. And it's not a perfect little piece. There we go. I'm gonna put an arrow up so I know which direction is the top part of my bow. Now I have my light pad, my glass mat, I have my placement guide right here in the center. Close up my Sharpie. I'm gonna take my applique pressing sheets and I'm gonna put it right on top and we're gonna build this bow unit, okay? And again, the only places that we need to iron are gonna be the center part where they overlap. So the parts of the bow that stick off to the left and right, we don't need to iron right now, right? Not until we put it on the fabric. So we're going to put piece number 1, piece number 2, and really the main thing of this video that I want you to get is to make sure that you realize to trim your block your border at the end. That's the most important thing. So number 3. Isn't this the cutest? I love the bow. If you did Christmas Lane, we have the Christmas Lane quilt as well. Has a bow on the top, just like this. Obviously different fabric, but same principle. It's a really cute way to top off this quilt, I think. Then we have piece number 5. Number 6. And you can be pressing before now if you want. I feel confident putting all my pieces, and again, have your up arrow, and then we'll get this centered just like so. And now with your iron, you're just gonna give it a press in the center. You just wanna make sure that these pieces stick together so you can get it on your background fabric. All right, so your bow is assembled. Just gently lift that off, and we are gonna move our fusing mat. Now my fabric that I'm using today in the tutorial, this is a piece of white fabric. You have your super cute fabric with the coral print on it, just like all your background blocks, okay? So I'm using just white. Your piece will be 2 pieces of fabric sewn together to make a really long, or 2 strips of fabric sewn to make a really nice long border. And what you're gonna wanna do is fold it in half and get your center line, and your center is gonna line up directly with this center point. Now, what I would do if I were you is take a little pin, and I would put a little pin so that you always know where your center of your bow is. There we go. That's for after you've sewn it and stuff. I would mark it with a pin. So I'll remind you of that again in a moment. So I'm gonna get rid of that crease so it's not so strong. And we're gonna pick up our bow. We're gonna drop it right on our border. There we go. And we're gonna iron it on. So now, just like that, you are ready to sew. So you're gonna applique this like you did all the other blocks. You're gonna use your buttonhole stitch or your favorite stitch for applique on your sewing machine. And in just a second, I'll show you. I believe we use number 1307 as the color, but let me double check in the pattern before I say a color I don't mean. So now we have this strip, right? So let's go to the back. Doot, doot, doot. You are sewing with, yes, 1307 petal pink. So that's step 11. So you can see we went through these other steps so quickly to get that ironed on. Now here's where I want to give you some tips. You are going to put your stabilizer behind this, and you're going to sew it with 1307. Now when it comes time to trim this, what I like to do sometimes when I'm trimming something that's long like a border, you want to make sure that you're really accurate in the width of being 6 1/4. Remember, we're trimming it down from 8 inches down to 6 1/4, but you're going to need to use a long, your, full cutting mat, right? So what I do is give myself a few little marks. Let me turn the light pad off so you can maybe see. There we go, a little better. I give myself a few little marks along my 8-inch line. There we go, just a few. And that way, when I go to my cutting mat, and I'm gonna give myself a little mark of my center line, because when I go to sew this, attach it onto the top of my quilt, I wanna have a few guidelines, basically. So now you'll go to your cutting mat, and you're gonna very carefully cut this entire strip down to the 6 1/4 in width, and then your length is going to be the width of your quilt. So whatever the top of your quilt measures is the length you're gonna cut this. So if it's 50 inches, you're gonna go 25 inches from the center to the right and 25 inches from the center to the left. So whatever your quilt measures, do that on both sides. Now, when you go to sew this on, it's easy to find the center of your quilt because you can see you have block, block, block. Right in the middle of this 4 patch right here at the top, that's gonna be your center. So this little center mark that I've put right here, I gave myself a little line right on the center. That's going to be where I start pinning my border on. And I'm gonna pin that right in the center of basically the center of blocks 2 and 3 on the sashing right here. That's where I would pin that. And then you will work your way to one side of the quilt pinning it on and your other way to the left side pinning it on. And then you're gonna be good to go. I just wanted to review those tips because every now and then we get emails. It kind of catches people sometimes that they're starting with a larger piece and trimming it down. But it's very, very easy to do that. And then again, at the end, after you have everything assembled, you are going to quilt your quilt as you would. And then you're going to want to put a hanging sleeve on there if you like, if you plan on hanging this quilt. And then at the very end, after it's quilted and you have your binding and everything done, you're gonna put these cute little button eyes that are included in your quilt on all of the bunnies. So you're gonna do buttons on all the bunnies. I wanna point out that your little chick, and then I think this is Kate and Chloe. I think that's Charlie Chickie and then Kate and Chloe. And then Delilah Ducky. They have French knots or stitched little lines that you can do for their eyeballs. So I hope that you found this quick little tip on making your bow applique helpful. And oh my gosh, I hope you had so much fun making this quilt. I really just absolutely love it and makes me want it to be Easter today. So as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Happy stitching!